Thank you for EAR and for this wonderful conference and the invitation for me to participate and learn from you. My main purpose for today's presentation is try to give a theoretical consideration of rising China. And to my knowledge, I think is very important because the difference of our perception of the implication of rising China partially depend on our theoretical background. So I try my best to give something new about rising China and its implication for Asia Pacific. As Chairman Ha and Professor Zhang Yunli mentioned yesterday, the theme of the conference is about rising China and new civilization. So I will give some historical perspective to describe what is the rising powers in history and what is the meaning for China in the future. So what kind of role China will play in the future? There are some very different views about China power. So I will give three very different views about Chinese power from US side. The first one is Aaron Friedberg, a professor at Princeton University. He born in 1950s, so his view is very interesting. He thinks China hegemony with many Chinese characteristics. China will return back to traditional China because it become center again in this continent in Asia. And the solution for his Sino-US relation is to promote China's democratization, as many scholars argued. If China became democratized, then the peaceful solution is possible for US and China. He graduated from Harvard. I mentioned several guys also graduated at the same university. I think he has a strong influence in US academy and policy making. The second one is James Coase, much older than Friedberg. He argued that China with Western characteristics means China will become a navy power and have a strong influence in financial and trading power. And he was born in 1938, much older. They also graduated from Harvard. The third one is much more familiar with us. All very old China head in US. He argued in 1991 China is may confronted Central Kingdom complex. More traditional way, I think, Scalapino mentioned. He also graduated from Harvard in 1948, and he consider China with very strong culture and some other civilization influence in this region, as our colleagues mentioned previously, use public diplomacy or culture exchange to influence neighboring countries. So I think these three kind of views reflect a very complexity of situation of China. So what is China? In Chinese academy, I think recent years we published several academic books to discuss what is China. So it's very complexity. It's still processing things to examine. I only illustrate the very complex situation when we discuss exam and China. We need a more theoretical, systematical way and a balanced view to discuss China's influence. So how about the Chinese leaders' perception of China's power? A very simple conclusion is China is a major power, but without power similar to Western countries. According to my knowledge, in international relations theories, when we say a country is a great power, we usually mean military sense, not other aspect of power. So according to this criteria, in 20th centuries, China is not so great compared to other major powers. So I checked Chairman Mao, Deng Xiaoping, and President Jiang Zemin's view, especially the English translation of their selected works. So you can see Chinese used the word very carefully to avoid the use great powers to words. You can say from 1930s to later 1990s, there are several and different words to describe the quality of Chinese power. So very different from the Western terms to describe the power. So when Chinese media, especially I think media, use the words terms from Western theories, they do not so careful to compare the different meanings. They just say the same words in Chinese, but actually the theoretical background behind these words is so different. So Chinese leaders never used the word great power or larger, bigger, middle, and yeah. So recently, President Xi, as our conference talked so frequently about President Xi's mentioned ambitious objective in the future. So I think the objective is so clearly to Chinese. According to this amendment of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, there are two important divisions, according to my understanding, which kind of power China wants to become or evolve in the future. So these two sentences give us a very clear picture about the future of China. And especially the last one, what is the community of shared future? Previously, before 19th Congress, National Congress, the English translation of 人类命运共同体 is something different from this one. So we emphasize the shared future, not the common destiny or such a translation. So it's something different, I think. So that means President Xi has, in his mind, I think, he has something new to this term. Although it's still needed to more discussion and more examination of what's the real to different real meaning to different regions, different countries. But in his mind, I think he is clear to establish a more positive relation with the other countries, share the future, yeah. And so why Western country scholars and Chinese leaders have so different perceptions about the power of great power? I think to Chinese leaders or to majority of Chinese, because of the size, the population, larger population, China is definitely to occupy a position in international system. And we can trace back to history. India and China has the two largest economy in the long history. In the United States or British only occupy a very prominent position during past 3 centuries. So which is normal, which is unique, if we trace back history. So that gives us a very strong impetus to promote China's position in international system. But we recognize the strong influence of Western civilization during past 3 centuries, not only technology and military, but I think many other aspects of forces, yeah. So these two figures could give us a very clear implication. There's a strong correlation between population and economic size. And in the early 19th, humans enter into a new stage of development. We enter into the modern economic growth stage, and that was contributed mostly by Western countries, especially industrial revolution. Though that created so many economic outcome and provide welfare to human beings. Yeah. So 10 years ago, novelist Robert Fogel predicted a very striking or dramatic scenario in 2040. How large China's economy will be. We're surprised for his prediction, 3 or 4 times than the size of U.S. economy. Yeah, very surprised. So I think this prediction gives some impression to U.S. strategists. Whether should we establish a more positive relation with China? But as Barry argued before, now on the Donald Trump administration, U.S. needed to reimagine what is China. I think it is the common background, not only for U.S. but also for China. We cannot predict very exactly China in the 2040 or 2050 based on different theoretical background. So along negative fact is development level is very important rather not than GDP. Because as I mentioned in history, India and China is the largest one in history, but to Chinese or to India, we are defeated by economies smaller than China or India. So we want to find the real reason why the so largest economy was defeated in modern era. So I found that the most important factor is the development level or measured by GDP per capita. You can see why British or UK can dominate the international system because it is much richer or much advanced in terms of GDP per capita. So you can see from 17th century to early 19th century evolved from UK to US. If we take a new perspective from GDP or using GDP per capita, we can see a very different picture about rising power and established power. Personally, I think why the Western countries are so sensitive to GDP because they are so small compared to India and China in history. But actually, they did not say much about GDP per capita because they are so rich compared to Eastern countries in history. That's the real reason or secret for Western countries to defeat Eastern countries. So if we find these new factors, then we can see why China or Deng Xiaoping initiated the reform and open, emphasize to development, not power or struggling for power. We should give a very clear picture to describe the history. So you can see China is not a rich country in major power club compared to other countries, United States, Kingdom, Japan, Russia. Chinese people's living condition or standard is still lower. If you travel inland China, you will see it very clearly, I think. So the unique characteristic of China power is the huge regional gap between coast province, East Coast province, and inland China. I compared with Japan, United States. I think China is very unique in terms of this condition. You can say the East Coast province in China attracted more than 80% of FDI trade and outward FDI. Although it only occupied or accounted less than 40% of population, but the GDP share is nearly 60%. So how to theorize this unique characteristic in international relations theory is very important to help us understanding President Xi's decision making of when he, for example, the BIR, Belt Road and Initiative. Why? I think in the initiative stage, want to balance East of China and Western China, not to struggle for hegemony. Yeah, because the huge gap between different among regions will be a threat to China's societal stabilization. So what's the difference? Well, China is very unique compared to other countries in East Asia. To my knowledge, I think not so different. You can say the economic growth rate declined from 10% to 6%, even in future, I think 2 or 3%. You can say the left figure. Japan, Korea also, I think, was experienced the same way. China is too large, so maybe can extend this term much longer than South Korea and Japan. But I think in the future, its growth rate will decline, definitely, with the growth of or improvement of China's living standard. Because during past 2 centuries, the Western countries' average growth rate is 2%. So in the future, I think China will converge into this point, 2%. So China needs to catch up with South Korea, Japan, the United States in terms of development level. So it's still a long way. You can say, although in terms of total, China is so big, but if we say from GDP per capita, we can say it's less small or lower than South Korea and Japan, because GDP per capita is indicator related to many other phenomena, you know. For example, technology level, the material consumption, air pollution, then I think related very closely. So to my knowledge is maybe a useful indicator to compare or give us a new perspective to understanding what is the power for contemporary China. So globalization and China rise. Now we see the Sino-US confronted a trade war. The US side criticized China the most benefits from the past era of globalization. Yes, we acknowledge this point. China benefited from the open for the economy, but actually it can only explain one part of China's success, because many other countries also part of this integrated global economy. So why they cannot obtain the same performance like China? So I think the majority or main cause the China's rise comes from China itself, the leadership, the younger generation such as us. So the international environmental change after 2008 financial crisis is the growth rate of global trade decline same to GDP. You can see from the figure Japan, the US, China, I think it's at the same after 2008 financial crisis. If we see the difference is before 2008 financial crisis, China experienced huge trade export boom compared to other. But situations already changed, I think, even before 2008 financial crisis. Professor Barry Brodin argued 2006 is a crucial point to compare China's different development road. From trade data, I think it's okay. Yeah, we can see this figure is very clear. Even before financial crisis, the share of GDP declined from nearly 65% of to nowadays I think near 40%. So in the future, does that mean China will move toward the model of the US? That means the economic growth dynamics mainly come from China's domestic market, not from global economy. As we know, 2 weeks ago, I think, in Shanghai, Chinese government held the first import-export. So it's an institutional innovation to illustrate China's willingness to establish a more positive relation with outside. So I think the figure give us some new consideration of China's development model, because many scholars would argue China is export-oriented development. So situations began to change, I think, because China is so large. How the world economy fits China, so large, yeah. So the military expenditure, the data was used frequently in neighboring countries. So I compare two indicators. It's the military expenditures, the share of GDP and share of central government expenditures. You can see compared to expenditure in social economic aspects declined, and the share of GDP maintained stable, I think. So this figure gives us very clear picture. What is China's grand strategy? What is China's intention? Yeah. So the three crucial stages in China's future development. I use data from Japan Energy Institute. It predicted the three crucial points in 2030, 2040, 2050. The GDP per capita is 15,000, 20, 30,000, and still you can see we have a huge gap with the United States. Even in 2050, the level I think is still less than 35% compared to the United States. So more welcome outcome is in 2050 we accounted 50% of US level in terms of GDP per capita. So what's the theoretical implication from my argument to developmental security? This term coined by me. I want to emphasize the strong linkage between development and security. So the first point is to low and middle income level developing country geography factor is very important, even maybe the most important things. But to developed countries, institutional innovation is the main concern. So the second point is, if geography is not so important now to China, why we discuss so frequently about the sphere of influence, dominance? This concept, I think, outdated, because what China needs is innovation, not to struggle for geography influence. And innovation mainly comes from some important cities in China, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Hangzhou, Suzhou, these cities. So we need to touch more deeply about the internal dynamics. So the third point is the future. Because China's future relied more on innovation, domestic, not international factors. So I think we can establish a more positive relation with the United States in terms of this new perspective. We should have something new idea, new perspective to discuss the future of relation. Thank you.